All right, here we go. Thanks so much, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. My name is Alex Bernier. I will be your tour guide today. We're going to be talking about integration with a third-party CMS. Before we get into that, just so you know who's talking to you, I have been doing digital signage for 15 years. That's all I've ever been doing. I started out in my 20s with funding from my family, and I've been doing it ever since. I do two products, passive and interactive displays. That's it. So passive as non-touch and interactive displays with Intuiface. We do ongoing support for hundreds of displays internationally. And the space that we're in is a lot of campus display systems, interactive media galleries. I'll pop open a beautiful Word doc where I simply just threw a whole bunch of pictures basically together. But we do informational-based kiosks. We don't really sell advertising or anything else like that. Directory boards, lobby displays, waiting rooms, interactive trade shows, and just, all those other weird things that you say yes to. Everybody knows what I'm talking about when someone brings something really interesting to your door. When I was putting this together, I kept getting reminded of a quote from one of my favorite audiobooks, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and that is, "Assembly of Japanese bicycle requires great peace of mind." And it sticks in my mind, one, because it's kind of weird, but it has a good meaning to design itself. And that is, your work is not done until your mind is at peace with it. And it's so fitting for this because you are going to be constantly at a tug of war between what the data requires and what the design requires. And it is a interesting experience putting those together until you finally are at peace with the end result. Topics we're going to cover today, examples and use cases. First, I want to show you a little bit about some displays that we've done so that you can see how they work. We'll talk about planning your data and the experience itself. That is the most important step. Intuiface tips for design, building the CMS and the online portal with our favorite software. It's called Knack. And some business-related suggestions and Q&A to follow up here. So let's get into some examples. Now, the first one that we are going to look at, let me just close this out here, is a wayfinding directory. So this seems like a good place to start. It's a pretty straightforward type of CMS that controls this, but you can do it in a very interesting way. So obviously we have our directory. There are two displays inside of this nice building here. You touch on the directory, you get your list of tenants. You can filter and sort them by different categories or by filter or featured tenants. In this case, we'll touch on Court Shop. You'll see a nice route for how to get there with this multi-touch map, which is simply a JPEG. As a featured tenant, they get a little extra feature, which is to show a PDF. Now let's jump into the other part of this, part of their CMS, which is the area map here, which shows other areas or points of interest in Minneapolis where this building is. So people can then do the same thing, filter different points of interest. And what I want to do is just show you a quick overview of the online account for this. So we're going to actually jump into that Knack portal. And this is what it would look like for a building management when they log into their account. They can see all of their tenants in a big list. They can set their kiosk map routes here with the different JPEG routes. Add a tenant, select and tag different categories for them, jump into the city map, points of interest, see an interactive map of those city points, add their city points, and everything syncs with their display. So pretty cool. The next one I'm not going to jump into the Intuiface account for, but this is a tablet-controlled retail display. So this is a honey counter. They have a whole bunch of honeys. You sync the database with the tablet and the video wall, and then you use local triggers in this case to tell the tablet to send actions to that video wall. In this case, it will fly a little honeybee across the map for the location where it comes from, and then information and pricing so the salesperson can have an educated discussion. And then finally, what we're going to do is jump back into Intuiface. We'll look at another client here with quite a mix of media. We're going to talk about this in our future slides here because of the presentation incorporates several different aspects that are helpful. First off, this is the United States Air Force Academy. They have some different menus. They manage about 6,500 names and donors inside of their donor role that can all be filtered, searched. They belong to different honor societies. And when you click on them, it does a little pop-up showing what each of them are belonging to. You can search by, if you just type in 198, it'll bring up everybody from the 1980s in the graduation. Sorting, searching, multiple pages. This one has giving priorities. So when donors give money, this tells you exactly where the money goes to. What we have is kind of a tandem, what I would call collection across the bottom. So you have one collection telling another collection to follow it. They do class ranking. So if you want to know and compare class participation in giving from previous classes, you can do that. They tell all their stories through PDFs. I love this menu. We'll talk about this because this shows different media content types all brought together in one. For example, this record has a video. This record may not have a video, but it has multiple pictures to it. So how do you handle those content variations in your CMS? I can talk to you a little bit about that coming up soon. And then finally, they have video galleries and other connections to other parts of their campus. But receiving information, obviously you want to get something onto your audience, a nice form that fills out. And instead of having Intuiface just send an email, this actually does a post command into the Knack database, adds a record, and then Knack itself sends a nicely formatted email to the visitor and the staff member itself. And then it's all saved so they can follow up later. Whew, okay, a lot to talk about real quick, so stay with me here. I'm going to close out of this experience. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint. Now, this is the most important part of the process, in my opinion. So I'm going to tell you my concrete process for showing you how to clarify your data and get everything up front in the planning phase. First, what we do is we have the customer create what's called a content guideline. It's essentially just a bullet-pointed document where the customer tells you what they want to see. And let them know that it's okay to be vague. They don't really know what the display can do yet, but you do need a starting point. So when they give you the starting point, you can uncover some interesting pieces of information. Again, have them write it. Don't write it for them because they're going to give you all those intrinsic details. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate this whole thing. So once you take a look and you review it, what you're trying to do is come up with your data template. And if you were to bring over one of those online accounts again here, take a look at the fields that you have. We have a title for like the story menu here, PDF, a video title. We have pictures in there too. So during this whole process, we were asking the customer, how many pictures do you have? Is there just one for them? Do they vary between the stories, Do you have a PDF for every single one of these? Do you have a video for every single one of these? And as you're clarifying this data, it's becoming easier for you to see how your template needs to be set up. And then that helps dictate how the layout goes. As you clarify all this, your main purpose of all this is writing your scope. And what is important about a scope is this is your evidence to the customer of what you're going to design. So when we took that display content guideline, we boiled it down. I wrote up a scope, a purpose and overview of the display, and then reclarified everything and how every feature of the menu is going to work and basically describing to them what it's going to do. So now, and then also adding optional features as well because people want to know what the next steps are if they want to add a phase 2 or whatever else. So the point is this scope is your main foundation for your entire project. This is what is going to keep you in the loop on what is outside of the scope. It's going to keep the customer in the loop on what you are designing. It's a document you're going to use for other designers that they can reference so everybody is on the same page delivering content based on the scope that everybody agreed on. Once you have everybody kind of in the loop, then we can finally set timelines. And timelines for the project are obviously important to make sure that you're on time and on budget. So when you get all that stuff together, everything flows nicely. You need to start somewhere and get the scope document put together. Next, make it easy for your customer to provide the content. Getting the content from your customer is always a bottleneck. Believe me, I know. They usually have many departments and types of people to pull in content from. and then they have to deliver it to you in an easy way. I always say make blank Excel documents with those field types that you discussed when you clarified the data, hand it over and say, hey, just fill in the records here. And also that way they can fill in, let's say, the sort letter. So for somebody's name, they will be able to fill in all the information. Were they a graduate? Put in true or false. When they put all that information in, it's already prepared for you, less data cleanup, and it's more accurate. So it works double. And you can proceed through your project with clarity and focus. Okay, moving on now. Actually, in the Intuiface design side, I've got some tips for you. I want to show you what a set collection is versus what I call a tandem collection. These are my own terms I made up, but these are going to help you to figure out how to lay out your data in the best way possible. We'll also look at animating the content in focus. So I have another display here from the Air Force. When you touch into it, it's just going to show somebody's face. When you scroll up and select somebody's name, all of a sudden you have kind of a cool little animation of their name and the year. When you touch on their name, then it's going to build their profile for you here, where they have a video and a story and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about the set collections versus the tandem collection here. I'm going to close out of some things so it makes it a little bit easier to see. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, now let's take a look at what a set collection is. That's your most common collection, I would say. And when someone touches on this face, I call it a set collection because when we look at the triggers, look, set. So think of it that way. It's a whole bunch of set because the profile details for this person is not a collection in itself. All it is a bunch of images and text sitting there, and you simply update all those media types according to what is inside of the data. A tandem collection, on the other hand, is basically what we see with these two lists. And that would be, we have kind of like this leader list where we have all the data coming in, but we're stripping everything out and just showing the name. And what happens is as soon as the item is scrolled, it is going to then tell the other collection, which also has the full data source of feed inside of it, to scroll to that index. Now, the interesting thing is because they're both using the same source, it doesn't matter how many things you add, they're always going to be in sync because they're in the same source. So basically, we just have a portrait information or a portrait feed from a swap collection, and it is just matching the index and focus of the swap collection. So all it does is lead. Now, why would you do this? Is sometimes, not all the time, this is up to you as a designer to figure out the best ways to use this. Sometimes you can get some performance benefits, and sometimes you want to give the user the ability to scroll through names and scroll through other pictures as well and have things kind of work together. Sometimes your data calls for that. In this case, all we needed to do, we got a little more performance out of showing the picture of it. Now, animating items in focus. This is the big thing I think all designers need to do. Most people do, but one thing that'll make your content look really nice when you use your swap collections or any other collections, something with focus, use this trigger. When an item comes into focus, do this. When it comes out of focus, do that. So basically what we have in this is a very simple example. When the item comes in focus, it's going to show the year banner here, and it's going to pull up their name. So keep in mind that use your groups again like this dynamic kind of cropper where things that are out of the visibility of the group are going to be not visible, but you use the in focus to bring them in. A very simple way to make your content look nice and have a little bit of animated touch. Okay, let's head back to our PowerPoint and see what we have next. We'll be looking at outliers and multiple media types next, and that kind of goes in with common script converters as well. So let's take a look here. Our next example, we'll jump back into the other display for Air Force. This menu with stories of impact is one I pointed out before because this one has multiple media types and some variations in the elements to it. Now, one of the basis of showing multiple media types is showing them when they are there and not the others when they're not. So what I mean by that is when I jump into the, let's say the swap gallery here. Let's say that this had multiple pictures and videos built into it as well. What we want to do is use a converter that looks at the data and says, hey, if an image is there, show image. If a video is there, show the video. And how you do that is you use this little custom script converter here. I'm going to use it for this video button because when a video is attached to this record, that button for the video is going to show. When it's not going to show. So the button itself is going to be tied to the path of the video. And then we use a little custom script converter that says, hey, if the path length is less than 1, which means it's 0, do not show. If it's anything other than that, then show. That means so. And the reason we use this, there's other ways to show and hide for blank instances. This seems to work the best from my experience with Android and Windows. It's just a little more fail-proof. So copy this down if you do need to use it. It is the most common custom script converter that I will use. Now, what's weird is you're actually going to, inside of your collections, add in your multiple media types. So you are going to have inside of like this collection feed a place for an image. You're going to have a video in there. You might have a PDF in there as well. And all you're going to do is use that custom script converter, bind it to your source collection, and use that converter that says, if that record has something, show this item. If that record does not, hide it. And inside of your data, like your online account over here, when someone is going to add a new record, you would want them to select which type of media they're adding so that they can only choose one of them and you won't have multiple showing at the same time. Okay, let's quickly go through a couple other of my favorite converters here. First one that a lot of people don't know about, the not converter. It's in math and logic. The not will basically do the opposite of something. Hey, if something's true, this will make it false. Things that you can use for the custom script converter I use a lot, which are, let's say I only have enough room for 4 items in a collection on my screen. So anytime there's greater than 4, I need to show a hand gesture to show that it's going to be swipeable after that. So until the customer adds in more content, that's really helpful. The linear converter is by far my favorite of all because it's not only great for parallax movement, but it's kind of like your way to save so many triggers. You can say, as one thing does one thing, you can have this item do another thing in absolute unison. It's wonderful. Finally, text manipulation. This is absolutely essential because as data comes in, you may need to change it a little bit. You may need to put in a comma after someone's last name or before someone's last name or something like that. Get familiar with all these. They're wonderful. Okay, on back to our PowerPoint. Now, the API down here is the backbone of your data. That connection is basically going to dictate a lot of what you can do on your screen. So let's talk about some tips there. First off, when to call your data. I would obviously just say only when needed. Don't have your database constantly pulled. It's also not good if you have requirements for your API levels. Sometimes you have to pay money for that. When to use get, post, put. Get, obviously, whenever you need to pull or update your content. Keep in mind, Intuiface will hit all of your APIs all at once right when your display starts. So you need to make sure you have a good internet connection. And also I'd suggest creating an admin panel that shows the success of each of your APIs so you can see if any of them failed. Post is great for sending a record from your display into your database. This is great for contact forms, surveys, that kind of stuff that people will take right on your display. Lastly, put is what will update one or many fields of an existing record. Think of this like a reservation for something. I'll show you in a little bit. When someone has a reservation for a conference room, they hit a button on the display, it checks them in, and it updates the record for the reservation as checked in. So that leads us right into Knack. And why do I choose Knack? Knack is a really awesome software. There's a lot of portals out there, but It's one of the only ones that allows you to design the back end and the front end. You can restrict user access to a very granular level. They have great documentation for their APIs. The people there are great. They're very good with support as well. So let's take a look real quick at what the Knack account looks like. For this, we're just going to look at a room reservation system. When somebody logs in and they want to reserve a room, Knack is good for this kind of stuff. They can basically see pictures of the room, make reservations, see a calendar for it, all that kind of stuff. Update their company info, add employees who can also make reservations on their behalf, etc. On the back end, this is what it looks like. So you have a data structure that you're setting up called your schema, obviously. And this is where you select different fields for your different data objects. They have a whole bunch, including different calculations that can all be done in the back end. You can upload different types of media types, etc. Once you set that up, now you're good to import and add your records. So for example, this is all company tenant data. Once people start adding reservations, then they'll have timed reservations and such in here. On the front end, which is on the pages side over here, this is what your customers will see. You set this up in a separate way, but kind of in tandem as you're working. So for example, if I look at the reserve a room, this is like your web page builder. I am taking the data from the back end and spitting it out on the front end to show only what I need it to show. So for example, if I click into this, all of a sudden I can edit all of these properties. I can choose what I want for each of these fields to show inside of the online portal. I can decide if there's additional fields that I want to show up or hide and restrict some of them from showing to the customer, that kind of a thing. And then down here you have the whole hierarchy for how the pages work. So as somebody clicks the room details reservations, it's going to go to this page where we have a whole layout for the room photos, the details. You can drop in the calendar. And as you're building these pages for your different views, you have a selection of different kinds of views you can use to visualize your data. Your forms, your details page, a table, which is more like this. This is more of like a details page. You can add in different sub-menus, which is kind of like what these buttons are. Then you can aggregate your data in charts and things. So if you use post commands or other things to actually make your own little analytics, you can visualize that with the built-in charts and things like that. If I were to click further on, let's say someone clicks add a reservation, that goes now to this page. And now I have access to all of these different fields and inputs for how the field form shows. Now believe me, if you are just seeing Knack for the first time, this is just scratching the surface. This would take an entire masterclass to kind of basically boil down. And if you're a Knack user joining us for the Intuiface conference, great to have you here. You know that I'm not doing this platform justice by the way of just describing quickly what it can do. But just know this is extremely powerful and you can do a lot of data prep before you pull it into your Intuiface experience. So let's go back to our final slide here. These are my final business-related suggestions. First, always test with your exact equipment. I can't tell you how many times I've previewed something on my computer and then deployed it down to the actual player PC, and then something is different. Always test with the exact equipment if you can. Learn how to lock down your Windows settings. When they start interrupting you, it's going to really make your life difficult. Use a PC with a discrete GPU. Intel graphics and built-in graphics are getting better, but a separated GPU like an RTX is going to run your presentation so much better. And lastly, if you provide support, like if you're doing permitted installations like us, charge a recurring support fee. As that display is sitting there for years, people are going to call you. Things are going to come up. You're going to need to update it. And I highly encourage you explain the value to that. So thanks so much for having me here today. Here's my contact information. If you do have further questions, we probably have a little bit of time. And then, of course, I do have an affiliate link for Knack. You can scan this QR code. You'll get your second month free, so you get a little kickback. And then I also get a little bit too. So in the interest of sharing, thanks so much once again. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.